7 months after my husband passed away, I hired a handyman to check a water leak in his study. But as soon as I walked through the door, welcome to my new story.
Mrs. Fulbright, I need you to come back to the house right now. I found something behind the wall in his study, and I think you should come alone. That was Tommy Wojcik on the phone, a plumber I'd hired 6 days earlier because of a water stain creeping across the ceiling below Russ's study, and I was standing in the parking lot of Grace Community Church in a black cardigan I'd ironed that morning, holding my Bible in one hand and my car keys in the other, trying to decide if I'd heard him right. It was a Sunday. No, wait. The service started at 10 and Tommy called at 9:40-something. I remember because I was annoyed I was going to miss the opening hymn, and then I felt stupid for caring about a hymn when a grown man was telling me to come home immediately, alone. I drove the 11 minutes back to our house on Fieldcrest Drive, doing 43 in a 35. My hands were doing that thing where they shake, but you can't make them stop, so you just grip the wheel harder and pretend that's a solution. Tommy was waiting on the front steps. He's mid-50s, Polish guy, built like a fire hydrant. My neighbor Gail recommended him, said he'd fixed her sump pump in 2 hours and charged her fairly. He had sawdust on his forearms and a look on his face I didn't like. I was tracing the leak behind the built-in bookshelf, he said. Had to pull off a section of drywall. And the pipe, listen, the pipe is fine, we'll get to that. But there's something bolted to the stud back there. He walked me upstairs. Russ's study still smelled like him, that sandalwood candle he kept on the windowsill, mixed with old paper and the faint staleness of a room nobody opens anymore. I hadn't really been in there since the funeral. 7 months. I'd closed the door when I walked past it like it was a room in a hospital I wasn't allowed to enter. Tommy had moved the bookshelf out about 2 feet from the wall. Behind it, a rectangle of drywall was cut away, and there, bolted directly to the framing stud, was a fireproof lockbox. Gray steel, about the size of a microwave. "I'm a plumber, not a detective," Tommy said. "But that ain't a pipe problem." I knelt down and unlatched it. My knees cracked. The box wasn't locked, just latched with a flip mechanism. Inside, cash. Banded stacks. I counted later. $43,200. Below the cash, a manila envelope stuffed with printed bank statements, a USB flash drive in a small plastic bag, the kind you'd get at a pharmacy. And at the very bottom, a single sheet of paper, folded twice, covered in Russ's handwriting. I recognized it before I even read a word. He had this way of writing, small, tight, perfectly straight even without lined paper, like he was filling out a form even when he was writing a letter. I didn't read the whole thing right there. My eyes caught pieces. Dwight has been billing the company through a shell LLC, over $300,000 across 3 years. Everything you need is on the drive. And then, near the bottom, underlined twice, "Don't trust Colleen." My stomach dropped. Not because of the money, not because of Dwight, because of Colleen. Colleen Halverson, Dwight's wife, who had texted me 3 days earlier asking if I wanted to get lunch at that Thai place off Veterans Memorial Parkway. Colleen, who had brought me a casserole the week Russ died and sat with me on the couch while I couldn't stop shaking. Colleen, who I'd been telling everything to for 7 months. I looked up at Tommy. He was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, looking at the floor, clearly trying not to see whatever was in that box. "You okay?" he asked. Number 1. I was not okay. I was kneeling on the floor of my dead husband's study, holding $43,000 in cash and a letter that was rewriting everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my husband's business partner, about the woman I thought was my friend. "The pipe," I said, because my brain needed something small to hold on to. "You said the pipe was fine?" Tommy paused, scratched the back of his neck. It didn't corrode naturally. Looked stressed, like someone leaned on it hard, or pried at it. I'm not saying anything happened. I'm just saying pipes don't usually do that on their own. I sat on the floor of that study for a long time after Tommy went back downstairs. Russ had hidden this box. He'd built evidence against his own business partner and bolted it inside a wall. And then he died of a cardiac arrhythmia on a Saturday morning before he could do anything with it. 7 months I'd been walking past this room. 7 months the answers were 12 inches behind the drywall. The first thing I did was stupid. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop at the kitchen table at 11 p.m. that same Sunday and spent the next 3 hours trying to guess the password. Our anniversary, June 14th, 2017. Denied. My birthday, March 3rd, 1992. Denied. His birthday, our address, our zip code, my maiden name, his mother's maiden name, the name of our street, the year we met, the word password. Denied, 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 denied. I tried 41 combinations. I know because I started keeping a list on the back of a grocery receipt after the first 10. By midnight, my eyes burned and my neck was locked up from hunching over the screen. By 1 a.m., I was typing nonsense. Let mine, Poinshaw, Fulbright, or Russ Fulbright. Like if I just kept guessing, the universe would reward my stubbornness. It didn't. The drive stayed locked. I almost threw it across the room. I didn't because it might have been the only copy of whatever Russ had spent months collecting, and smashing it against the refrigerator wouldn't bring him back or make me less angry. So I went to the paper. The bank statements in the manila envelope covered 31 months. I spread them across the kitchen table, took up the whole surface, edge to edge, some of them overlapping. Every single month had a transfer from the Fulbright and Halverson business account to something called Halverson Consulting, LLC. The amounts weren't identical. $8,200 one month, $11,400 the next, $9,750, $12,100. Irregular enough to not trigger a pattern alert. Regular enough that someone was being very deliberate. I added them up on my phone calculator, twice because the first total made me lightheaded, over $310,000. From the business my husband built, that label maker, I keep thinking about it. Russ had this thing where he'd label every folder with a label maker, not just the tab, the whole front of the folder. The man went through label tape like it was oxygen. He labeled the spice jars, he labeled the circuit breakers, he labeled the bins in the garage, and he labeled every single one of these bank statements by month and year, top right corner, before putting them in order. Even when he was uncovering the worst betrayal of his life, he was organized. That's who he was. My phone buzzed. Patricia, Russ's mother. Have you gone through Russell's personal things in the study yet? Her voice was clipped, tight. The way it had been for months now, like she was reading from a script she didn't enjoy. I lied. Not really. Haven't had the energy. Silence. A long one then. You should. She hung up. No. Good night. No, I love you, sweetheart. Just click. Patricia had been like this since the funeral. Before Russ died, she called me twice a week. We'd talk for an hour. Her recipes, my work stories, gossip about her neighbor who was building an illegal shed. After the funeral, she stopped. Birthday, nothing. Thanksgiving, a 2-line text. I told myself she blamed me, that she thought I should have noticed Russ's heart condition sooner, should have made him go to the doctor, should have done something. It hurt worse than I expected. Losing Russ was a wound. Losing Patricia was salt. 20 minutes after Patricia hung up, my phone lit up again. Dwight Halverson. Eleanor, how are you holding up? Listen, I've been thinking. That buyout offer is still on the table. $125,000 for your half of the business. Clean, simple, no hassle. You don't want the headache of a flooring company, right? Let me take it off your plate. His voice was warm, friendly, concerned sounding, like a man offering to carry your groceries while he's pickpocketing you. I told him I wasn't ready to decide yet. He said, of course, take your time. But there was something underneath his patience, a thin wire of urgency he couldn't quite hide. After I hung up, one more notification, a text from Colleen. Just thinking about you, coffee this week? I stared at that heart emoji for a full minute. Russ's letter in his small, tight handwriting, don't trust Colleen. I typed back, sure, how's Thursday? Then I set my phone face down on the counter and washed my hands, even though they weren't dirty. I just needed to do something with them. Janine has been my best friend since 10th grade at Wright's Memorial. We survived braces, prom, her first divorce, my parents' separation, a disastrous road trip to Myrtle Beach in 2014, where her Chevy Malibu threw a rod in West Virginia, and approximately 9,000 hours of sitting in her kitchen, drinking terrible coffee while solving each other's problems. I called her on a Tuesday evening and told her everything. The lockbox, the cash, the bank statements, the USBI couldn't open, Russ's letter, the warning about Colleen. Janine was quiet for about 8 seconds, which for Janine is practically a coma. Halverson Consulting, LLC, she repeated. Give me until tomorrow afternoon. Janine works as an admin assistant at the Vanderburgh County Assessor's Office. She's not a lawyer. She's not an investigator. She's a woman with access to public records and a very low tolerance for men who steal things. By Wednesday at 2:15 p.m., she called me back. Halverson Consulting, LLC. Registered 3 years ago with the Indiana Secretary of State. Sole member, Dwight A. Halverson. Registered address, P.O. Box 4481, Evansville. No employees, no physical office, no website, no nothing. There it was, a company owned entirely by Dwight, billing the business he co-owned with my husband for services that didn't exist. 3 years of fake invoices, over $310,000 drained from a company Russ poured everything into. Someone from Ohio commented on my last video at 1 in the morning. Said she was watching while folding laundry. I love that. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, because this story is about to turn. I took everything to Dennis Yu. His office is in a small building on Southeast 2nd Street, sandwiched between an insurance agency and a nail salon. Dennis is the kind of lawyer who wears reading glasses on a chain around his neck and has 2 framed photos of his daughters on his desk, both in soccer uniforms. Janine's cousin used him for a business dispute 4 years ago and said he was calm, thorough, and didn't charge you for breathing. Dennis spread the bank statements across his conference table. Read Russ's letter. Examine the LLC filing Janine had printed. He was quiet for a while. This is suggestive, he said. Strongly suggestive. But it's not conclusive. If Halverson claims the consulting was legitimate, that he provided real services to the company, these paper records alone might not be enough to prove otherwise. We need what's on that USB drive. That's where your husband kept the direct evidence, the invoices, the correspondence, the accounting, exports. I felt like someone had let the air out of me. All that work, all those bank statements, and it wasn't enough. I sat in my Kia in the parking lot afterward with the engine off. The windshield was dusty. A receipt from Walgreens was stuck under the wiper blade, and a thought crawled in that I hadn't let myself think before. What if Russ was involved too? What if the $43,200 in cash wasn't evidence? What if it was his cut? What if I was about to destroy my dead husband's reputation over a business arrangement I didn't understand? What if Russ wasn't the victim? What if he was... I couldn't even finish the thought. I sat there for 20 minutes, engine off, hands in my lap. I felt like a spy in a movie, except the spy drives a dented Kia and cries in the parking lot of a strip mall next to a nail salon. Then I pulled out the letter, read it again, slower this time. I should have told you. I was trying to fix it myself first. That was wrong. I thought if I had enough proof, I could confront Dwight directly and force him out without dragging you into it. I'm sorry, Eleanor. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get there in time. Russ wasn't stealing. He was building a case, methodically, carefully, in his labeled folder, label maker way, and he ran out of time. I wiped my face with my sleeve, took a breath, and then I noticed something I'd missed. Inside the lockbox lining, partly tucked under the felt, something small and metallic. I'd left the box in my trunk. Hadn't wanted it in the house where someone might see it. I leaned over the back seat and pulled up the felt. A brass key, small, flat, stamped with a number. Taped to it, a sticker, the kind you'd get from one of those label makers. SKS number 117. Safekeep Storage sits on North 1st Avenue between a tire shop and a place that sells discount mattresses, the kind of facility with a keypad gate and fluorescent lights that hum too loud. I drove there on a Thursday morning before my shift at the clinic. Unit number 117 was on the ground floor, second row from the back. The brass key fit. The lock turned with a click that echoed off the concrete floor, and the roll-up door groaned open. 3 banker's boxes, stacked neatly, each one labeled, because of course they were, with Russ's label maker. Halverson, invoices. Halverson, email correspondence. Halverson, timeline, plus notes. I sat cross-legged on the cold concrete and opened the first box. Printed invoices from Halverson Consulting, LLC, billed to Fulbright and Halverson Commercial Flooring, each one signed by Dwight, each one for vague consulting services, market research, vendor negotiations, client acquisition strategy, the kind of words that sound professional and mean nothing. 38 invoices total. The second box was emails, correspondence between Dwight and contacts at companies I'd never heard of, except Russ had highlighted sections in yellow. The email addresses were fake. The contacts didn't exist. Russ had printed Woy's lookups showing the domain names were registered 3 days before the invoices. He'd printed IP trace reports. Every single email chain led back to the same origin point. The third box was Russ's timeline. Handwritten, 9 pages, small tight letters. He dated every entry. The last one was written 9 days before he died. I need a second here. This part still gets to me. Seeing his handwriting, not from a birthday card or a grocery list, but from this. Pages and pages of careful, patient documentation of the worst thing anyone had ever done to him. He must have worked on it at night after I went to bed, in that study, behind the door I used to close. Okay, that same evening I tried the USB drive one more time. I'd been thinking about Russ all day. Not the business, not the evidence. Just him, the stories he used to tell, how he'd talk about growing up in Terre Haute, his dad's garage, the neighborhood kids, and one story kept circling back. The night he told me about his childhood dog, a beagle named Biscuit, who he got for his 10th birthday in 1994. He told that story the way some people talk about their first love. His eyes went soft. He said Biscuit slept on his bed every night until college. I typed, Biscuit 1994. The drive unlocked. The paper bank statements I'd found only covered 31 months. The USB had everything, all 37 months of transfers, 3 years of zero accounting backups, photographed invoices with metadata timestamps, screenshots of the fake email accounts, including the registration details, everything organized in folders by month and year. Russ was the kind of man who labeled his circuit breakers. Of course, he organized evidence the same way. Every dollar traced, every lie documented. 300 og 4 og 4200 og $16 total. I should have been relieved, and I was for about 48 hours. Here's where I made my mistake. Thursday afternoon, coffee with Colleen at that Thai place on Veterans Memorial Parkway. I was distracted, running on 4 hours of sleep, buzzing with this new feeling that I hadn't felt in 7 months. Purpose, direction, something to do besides grieve. And Colleen asked how I was doing, and I said, better, actually. I've been going through some of Russ's old business files. Getting organized, it helps. Casual, throwaway. I even smiled when I said it, but Colleen's hand paused on her iced tea, just for a half second. Her eyes did this thing, sharpened, then went soft again like a camera refocusing. She said, oh, that's great, honey. I'm sure that's therapeutic. I caught it, that flicker, and I knew. The way you know when you've said the wrong thing at a dinner party, when you feel the air change. I knew I'd made an error, but it was already out. You can't unsay a sentence. 2 days later, Dwight Halverson was on my front porch. He rang the doorbell at 6:45 p.m. I was still in my scrubs from work, reheating leftover soup. He was wearing khakis and a quarter-zip pullover, and his Escalade was parked crooked in my driveway like he'd been in a hurry. Eleanor, big smile, tight jaw. Listen, I've been meaning to come by. With the business transition and everything, there are some company records Russell may have kept at home. Contracts, vendor files, that sort of thing. As his partner, I really should have those back. He was standing in my doorway, looking past me into the house. His eyes moved to the stairs, toward the study. I told him I hadn't found any business documents, just personal things, photo albums, old tax returns. Nothing exciting. He nodded, slowly. Well, if anything turns up, you'll let me know. It's important for the books. He left, but he sat in his Escalade in my driveway for a full minute before pulling away. I watched through the living room blinds. 2 days after that, a letter arrived, certified mail, from the law office of Reinhardt and Goss, representing Dwight A. Halverson, a formal demand for all business-related records, financial documents, and proprietary materials in the possession of the estate of Russell T. Fulbright. The letter cited partnership agreement clauses I'd never read. It gave me 14 days to comply, Colleen told him. Colleen heard me mention Russ's files, and she picked up her phone before the check arrived. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher. I was eating saltines out of the sleeve, not even the good crackers, the plain ones from the bottom shelf at Kroger. That's how low I was. I called Janine. I could barely keep my voice steady. Maybe I should just take the $125,000. Maybe I should sign it over and walk away. He's got lawyers. He's got Colleen feeding him everything. I'm a dental hygienist, Janine. I clean children's teeth for a living. What am I doing? Janine was quiet for 3 seconds. Russ hid that box for a reason, Eleanor. He didn't build 3 years of evidence for you to hand it to the man who robbed him. I didn't say anything. I was looking at the floor tile where Russ had dropped a cast iron pan 2 years ago and chipped the corner. We'd never fixed it. We said we would, every couple months, and then we'd forget. I went upstairs, sat in his chair, opened the third box, the timeline, and read the last entry, dated 9 days before he died. His handwriting was smaller than the rest, like he was running out of room or running out of time. Meeting with you and Kessler on the 14th to discuss filing options. If this doesn't work, I go to the DA directly. He never made it to that meeting. The 14th was a Monday. He collapsed on the Saturday before. I closed the box, put my hand flat on the lid, and I said it out loud in that empty room that still smelled like sandalwood. I'll finish it. Monday morning, I called Dennis Yu and told him everything. The storage unit, the USB, the 3 years of QuickBooks exports, the fake invoices, the IP traces, the email registrations, all of it. Dennis cleared his Tuesday afternoon. I brought every box, the USB drive, and a laptop. We spent 4 hours in his conference room. Dennis read through Russ's timeline entry by entry, cross-referencing against the invoices and bank transfers. At one point, he took off his reading glasses, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Your husband was thorough." He labeled his circuit breakers, I said. Thorough was his love language. By Friday, Dennis had the full picture. 38 fraudulent invoices over 37 months, everyone signed by Dwight, everyone payable to an LLC solely owned by Dwight, every corresponding vendor traceable to email accounts registered from Dwight's home, IP address. Total damages, $347,216. Not a round number. Russ tracked it to the dollar. Dennis drafted 2 letters. The first was a formal demand to Dwight. Full restitution of $347,216, plus a buyout of Eleanor's 50% share at independently appraised fair market value, $410,000, within 30 days. The second letter was addressed to the Vanderburgh County District Attorney's Office, outlining the fraud with supporting documentation, ready to send if Dwight refused. Now I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just go to the police first? Because Dennis explained something that stuck with me. Criminal cases take months, sometimes years. A civil demand with the threat of criminal referral gives the other side a reason to settle fast. Dwight didn't want a DA investigation. He wanted this to disappear, and we were going to use that. The letters went out on a Tuesday. Wednesday evening, someone knocked on my front door. Not Dwight this time, Patricia. She was standing on my porch in the coat she'd worn to Russ's funeral, that long gray one with the buttons. Her eyes were red. She hadn't called first. She hadn't texted. "Can I come in?" We sat at the kitchen table. She put her purse on the chair next to her, the way she always does, and then she started talking. I knew something was wrong with that business. Russell called me 2 months before he died. He said he was worried about the books. He said Dwight was... He used the word skimming. I told him to talk to a lawyer. I told him to get proof. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I should have pushed harder. I should have driven down here and sat in that study with him and made him take action. Instead, I said, "Handle it, Russell." And I hung up, and I went back to watching Jeopardy. And 2 months later, my son was dead. She wasn't cold because she blamed me. She was cold because she couldn't look at me without seeing every opportunity she'd missed. We cried at that kitchen table for a long time. I made her chamomile tea in the mug Russ gave her for Mother's Day, the one that says, "World's okayest mom," because that was their joke. She held it with both hands and didn't drink it, and that was fine. The following Monday, Dennis Yu's conference room, Eleanor Fulbright, an attorney on one side, Dwight Halverson and his attorney, a nervous guy from Reinhardt and Goss named Pfeiffer who kept adjusting his tie, on the other. Dwight came in confident, polo shirt, tanned, cologne I could smell from across the table. He shook Dennis's hand like they were at a golf outing. Dennis opened a folder and began placing documents on the table, one by one. Invoice after invoice, bank transfer after bank transfer, each one with Dwight's signature, each one payable to his LLC. Then the email printouts, the IP traces, the domain registrations. Dwight's smile died somewhere around invoice number 12. His attorney, Pfeiffer, started reading faster, flipping pages. His face went pale in a way that was almost medical. These consulting services were legitimate, Dwight said, but his voice had changed, higher, thinner. I provided real strategic advisory work to the company. Dennis didn't argue. He just placed one more document on the table, an email from Dwight to one of his fake vendor addresses, sent from his personal Gmail, in which he wrote, "Send the invoice for $11,400. Same template as last month. Use the market research header." The room went very quiet. Dwight built the entire structure himself, his name on every document, his signature on every invoice, his LLC, his email address, his IP address. He'd built a cage around himself, bar by bar, over 3 years, and never once imagined someone would find the blueprints. Pfeiffer pulled Dwight into the hallway. They were gone for 9 minutes. I counted. When they came back, Pfeiffer did the talking. Full restitution, $347,216, plus buyout of my 50% share at appraised value, $410,000. Structured payment within 60 days. In exchange, we would not refer the matter to the DA's office. Dwight signed the settlement with a pen Dennis provided. His hand shook. He didn't look at me once. I looked at him, though, and I said one thing. "You offered me $125,000 for something worth $410,000. You should have known. Russ taught me how to read a number." He walked out of that office with Pfeiffer trailing behind him. The Escalade, leased, it turns out, leased with money from a company he was bleeding dry, pulled out of the lot and turned left and disappeared. I sat in Dennis's conference room for another 5 minutes. Janine was in the waiting room. She'd driven me. Dennis started packing up the folders. "Your husband built a good case," he said. "He built a great case," I said. "I just delivered it." The settlement cleared in 53 days. Dennis called me at work, right between a 6-year-old's cleaning and an 8-year-old's sealants. I stepped into the break room that smelled like burnt coffee and microwaved popcorn, and he said the words, "Funds are in your account." I paid off the mortgage that afternoon, the one that had gotten tight over the past 2 years, because of course it had. When your business partner is siphoning $8,000 to $12,000 a month, the numbers stop adding up. Russ must have been juggling payments in the dark, trying to figure out why the margins kept shrinking. He probably blamed himself before he found the truth. Patricia comes to dinner every Thursday now. We cook Russ's favorite, chicken paprikash from his grandmother's recipe card. The card is stained with paprika and has a water ring from a glass someone set on it in 1986. Patricia holds it like it's a holy document, which, to her, it probably is. We don't talk about Dwight. We talk about Russ, the stories, the label maker, the time he tried to build a pergola from a YouTube tutorial and it leaned 11 degrees to the left and he insisted it was architecturally intentional. Dwight sold his Escalade. Janine told me she has a friend who works at the Vanderburgh County Clerk's office, and apparently Dwight filed to dissolve Halverson Consulting, LLC, about 3 weeks after the settlement. He's still in Evansville, as far as I know. Doing what? I don't care. He became irrelevant the moment he signed that paper. Colleen sent me a text about a month later. "I hope you know I never meant any harm. I was in an impossible position. I hope someday you'll understand." I read it. I read it twice, actually. Then I set my phone down and went back to watering the basil plant on the kitchen windowsill. I don't hate Colleen. I don't have the energy for people who chose the wrong side and want forgiveness without ever saying the word sorry. That text wasn't an apology. It was a request to feel better about herself, and I don't owe her that. Tommy Wojcik sent his final invoice for the plumbing work, $1,847. I paid it the same day from my checking account. I added a $200 tip and a handwritten note on a piece of cardstock. Thank you for telling me to come alone. He texted back a thumbs up emoji. That's the most Tommy thing I've ever seen. The study is different now. I moved the bookshelf back, patched the drywall, repainted, but I kept the room open. I put a reading chair by the window, one of those overstuffed ones from the consignment shop on Washington Avenue, and sometimes I sit in there in the evenings with a book. Pepper curls up on the rug next to me. That's Russ's dog, a beagle mix we adopted 3 years ago. Russ named him Pepper because he said the spots looked like ground pepper, which is a stretch, but I never argued. Last Tuesday evening, I sat on the back porch, Pepper at my feet, iced tea in one of those big, ugly plastic tumblers Russ used to love, the kind you get free at a gas station promotion and inexplicably keep for a decade. The fireflies were out. June does that in southern Indiana. The whole backyard lights up like something from a dream. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. Russ couldn't finish it, so I did. Someone told me last time that these stories make them feel less alone. That one comment sat with me all week. Thank you for being here. It means more than you know. There's another story on your screen right now. I made it for you.